Well, g'day everyone. It is the Two Ordinary Cops, and we are back again, mate. Damo, how are you?
Cold, mate. Cold. It's I'll whinge about it to the day's end. It's just bloody freezing, but that's all right. That's all good. We're going to get a heap of rain again. Not that we need it, but that's all right. How's
Yeah,
Brizzy, mate?
yeah, mate. It has been a little bit colder, but not as cold as you because I was down there on the weekend. We got to catch up and have had a great old day on the Saturday, just catching up and having a yarn, and had a little fire around us, and yeah, mate, it was a fantastic day, and I miss those days. It's what we used to talk about in the police about having the police club and all that sort of thing, just catching up and telling yarns, and we can just tell our stories and don't have to worry about anybody else listening.
Yeah, no, people get it. It was good. It was an excellent day. Actually, we just sat around having beers, and it was very good for your mental health, Shilty, which segues beautifully into today's episode, I should say.
Yep.
So we've got a very special guest again. We've been having a few guests on lately, and they just seem to be getting better. I mean, not knocking the people who've come before. That's going to cost me beer, but that's all right. I'll buy more.
It will do.
Yeah. So today we have a very special guest who is a former civilian intelligence analyst with the Queensland Police Service, and has now gotten out, went through some dramas with some pretty full-on operational support, which she'll go into. And has now formed her own company in Brisbane, and it is specialising in the operational performance and recovery as an operational and performance and recovery trainer, talking about nervous system dysregulation in first responders and the ways that people can deal with that both operationally and in their private life. So welcome, Karlie Fleming. How are you going?
Thank you very much. Thank you both for having me. I'm very well, thank you.
That's all right. How did I go with the introduction? Did I get it wrong or right?
No, you did amazing. It was a bit of a tongue twister, wasn't it?
There we go. No, that's good. That's good. So, Karlie, thanks very much for coming along with us. We're right into this a bit because the Northern Territory obviously has civilian staff, but they're not really interlaced within the operational world. They sort of work in forensics and obviously lots of admin roles and things like that. I know a lot of other jurisdictions really do use non-sworn staff in a lot of operational support, which is a little bit new to us. So I think what we'll do is, once again, as we said off air, this is your show. So do you want to take us through your career, what you did, and then we'll roll into how that affected you, and we'll sort of talk about how you ended up where you are now.
Yeah, definitely. So initially I wanted to actually be a police officer myself. I had a pretty clear vision of what I wanted to do. So I wanted to have a degree behind me before I applied for the service. So I went in and I applied for a Bachelor of Criminology and Criminal Justice and a Bachelor of Human Services, majoring in Families and Youth Justice. That was a 4-year degree. So at the end of that degree, I ended up getting a placement for 3 months with the Ethical Standards Command in Brisbane. Worked there for 3 months, absolutely loved it. The people were fantastic. And then once I finished, during that time, I applied to join the job. I think it was in my last year of uni. But unfortunately, I ticked on the application form that I had asthma. So they made me go and do a bronchial test, which is a specialist test to make sure that I passed, that I could pretty much put up with all the training. And I failed that bronchial test, which means I had to wait for 2 years before I could apply again. So I ended up finishing uni and I applied for an admin job with ESC that came up as an AO2. And I ended up being offered the AO2 role, as well as on the same day I got offered an AO4 role with probation and parole. But because I really wanted to work with police, I took the AO2 thinking, no, this is going to be my foot in the door and I'll learn as much as I can before I apply for that second time. So I worked in ESC as an admin officer, worked in honours and awards, and a couple of years after working in there, my dad ended up getting cancer and had a pretty horrific cancer battle and subsequently passed away. And during that time, I was made to see a human service officer, so the HSOs, who were psychologists. They were absolutely fantastic in their support. They came to the hospital, supported me through that entire process. But then when I applied for the second time to join the job, I ticked on the form that I'd seen a psychologist, which meant they had to give me write a report. They wrote the report, and they showed me, like, I read it, it was fantastic. They said, this will just go for you. It shows your resilience. And unfortunately, there was one line in there that said I suffered from periods of down mood and sleepless nights. That got me rejected again. So I thought if I didn't have periods of down moods and sleepless nights after going through kind of losing my dad, who was my best mate, I'd be a psychopath. So I was pretty cranky about that. So I thought, all right, I've given up. It was 4 years worth of trying to get in to become a police officer. So I thought, all right, what other avenues can I try where I can still work very closely with police and on investigations? So I applied for an intel role as a civilian, but because I wasn't sitting in an intel role, I couldn't do the intel training. But I couldn't do the intel training unless you were in an intel role, so it was a bit of a catch-22. So I decided to go and apply to do some practical placement work or shadow work with the behavioural specialist unit. Have you guys heard of that? Did you have anything like that?
Yeah.
I have heard of it, but we certainly didn't have one up there. It was
no.
Yeah, right. So civilians, it was just police, 2 police officers in there who did an incredible job. Civilians weren't able to work in that unit, but I ended up getting it approved and did some voluntary work in there just after my shift ended. During the day, I'd go down and do some work in there and help them out, so that I ended up getting some intel training, I guess, from them. And that allowed me then to apply and win an intel role in the Child Protection Offender Registry unit. And that was in the Child Safety and Sexual Crime Group in Brisbane. I love that job, but the nature of the work, I was in there for 5.5 years, and probably around that 4th year in there, the job started to get to me a little bit. So it was pretty heavy content. So in that role where, you're doing risk assessments and providing intel support to the case managers who are working with sex offenders, high risk sex offenders. So I saw some pretty horrific jobs when I was in there. Worked some pretty horrific cases, and some that still to this day have stayed with me. And I guess in my 4th year in there, I started to develop some health issues. I started to get these chest pains that were starting, and they thought I was having heart attacks, that were happening, but it ended up just being just such a severe, I think, nervous system dysregulation. It was shutting down my digestive system, and it was affecting my heart and my chest. I started getting these repeated flashbacks of jobs that I was working. One in particular, there was actually 2 child death jobs that I worked that were pretty traumatic, just to read through. So I can't even imagine what the police on the road and actually who had to deal with the victims, or the scenes, and the offenders. I can't even imagine what they had to go through. So yeah, those jobs stayed with me and ended up pretty much, I guess, through vicarious trauma. I ended up developing like PTSD from the job. But interestingly, at the time when I was in it, I didn't realise it, that it was affecting me so bad, because I loved my job and I didn't want to be moved from that unit. So I was someone who pretty much went to work. I had a smile on my face most of the time. I was a pretty happy-go-lucky person, and I think I masked it pretty well. And I also didn't think that because I was in the office and I was a civilian, I didn't think I was warranted to have those feelings. I didn't feel like it should be affecting me that way. And was I weak? Could I just not put up with this job? Could I just not cope with it? So I didn't really speak up either, which in hindsight I probably should have. So, but I guess you don't really realise until you get to that breaking point sometimes that you're heading down that track. So I ended up working this one in particular job that I worked on for about 12 months, and that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me. It was a child trafficking job. It was pretty big and didn't really go in the direction that I thought it would, or that I was hoping that it would go. There were some moral injustices there that I really struggled with, and I ended up snapping at work one day pretty bad, which was very out of character for me. But as a result of that, I was told, you've probably had your time in here. 5.5 years is a pretty long time in that unit, dealing with the nature of the work that we were dealing with. So I was made to go on leave for a few weeks. And whilst I was on leave, my mental health kind of declined even more rapidly, I guess. I was waking up in the middle of the night crying with just not understanding what was going on. I couldn't eat. Every time I ate, I'd end up with these chest pains. I was getting, dizziness and nausea all the time. Couldn't sleep, so insomnia. I was having flashbacks, even though I never saw the scenes in real life. Just reading the material that you're reading, seeing photos and videos, create pretty strong pictures in your mind. So, I was still seeing these visions, images in my mind, and kind of haunted by a couple of jobs that now, thankfully, through the work that I've done over the last couple of years, I've learned to, let go of the emotional attachment to it. So you still have the memories, but the emotional attachment isn't there. So, which is good. So then, I went on to, after working in there, I was moved to the Covert and Specialist Operations Unit, and I was tasked with setting up the tactical intel capability in that unit. Absolutely love that job. That was by far the best part of my career. There was just myself and another civilian that were in there creating this new intel capability, and they had never had intel support before, so it was a very police-dominated role. But after a couple of days in there, getting to know everyone, and they started to trust us, it was good. So, we developed this intel capability that ended up being quite big, and I was in there for 5.5 years. But unfortunately, just the high, the high demands and the pressure of the job, and that constant, you're constantly on the go, switched on from the minute you got to work, on the radios, providing tactical intel support to the teams in real time, prepping for jobs before the teams rolled out. So, and the fact that I worked for the unit that I worked in, I wasn't able to tell my friends or my family where I worked or what the nature of the job was that I worked. And again, I dealt with some and worked on some very high-risk jobs, a lot of CT jobs, your homicides, your bikies, the kind of the worst of the worst.
Karlie, I'll just inform everybody, CT is counter-terrorism, just so everyone knows.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yep. No, you're right. All's well.
So even though, and I used to, I tried to get out on the road as much as I could with the teams if anyone wanted to take me. So we got invited to go on. I'd go out on the road sometimes, which was great. It was a lot of fun, and kind of worked very closely with the officers in there. And you kind of felt like one of the team. We were treated like one of the team. It's fantastic, but again, just being switched on all the time. even I was extremely hypervigilant when before you would go to work, you'd be making sure you weren't followed. When you left work, you're making sure you weren't followed. I was constantly scanning number plates when I was on my way home. If I was out, especially in crowded places, I was very uncomfortable. I guess because of a lot more than what the general public know, and we would be constantly scanning jobs every day, like all the jobs that were coming in. We'd be scanning what's called CAD, which is our computer-aided dispatch. You'd be scanning all the jobs coming in, so you're aware of what was happening in your local area, as well as working these big jobs as well. So it was very hard for me to switch off, and even as a civilian, even though I wasn't on the road as a police officer, even as a civilian, I struggled switching off. I was constantly thinking worst case scenario, because as an intel analyst, that's what you did as well. The what if this happens and what if that happens, when we have to prepare for it and be ready for it. So that hypervigilance and that situational awareness over time really started to affect my personal life as well. So when I would come home from work, I couldn't really enjoy time with my family without thinking about work. I'd be constantly thinking about the jobs that I was, I had to prep for the next day, or wondering how that job was going that I just worked, the day that I had worked prior to coming home, and you couldn't talk to anyone about it.
Yeah.
So, you just kind of keep it to yourself, seeing stuff on the news, and you're like, oh yeah, working that one, or I work that job, and oh, if only you knew, it was kind of that thing. But it actually started to affect my parenting. So I became a real helicopter parent. I pretty much got banned from even going for scooter rides with my son and my partner, because it was I was called the fun police, because I was constantly thinking worst case scenarios. Oh, he's going to get hurt, he's going to do this, what if he gets hit by a car? Because that's the stuff that I'd read about, that's the stuff that I'd seen, and they're the kind of jobs that I work. So I think that in addition to, I had a lot of death in my personal life from an early age. So I had a lot of trauma growing up through the loss of loved ones. So I learned at a very young age that people you love die, and had seen a significant amount of death. So from having that exposure to that from a young age, and then going in and working in the field that I worked in, it kind of all, I think, it was that accumulated kind of trauma that started to really affect my nervous system and the way that my brain was wired, constantly looking out for threat. So yeah, when it got to a point where my partner and I was saying, this is it's overbearing. You're just always catastrophizing the worst case scenarios. You need to just chill out. And I'd be getting really irritable, like quite agitated, really easy. And yeah, my moods were, pretty bad, mood swings. And so it really started to change the way that I was, as a person. And I started to realize that there was something wrong. And then after a few years of that, I had some pretty horrid heart episodes again. So I started getting these chest pains, different to what I had when I was working in C4. But these heart episodes started hitting me, and I had one when I was at work, one shift, and there was nothing stressful in my mind. I was just working a normal job, and started to, feel really nauseous, and my whole body went cold, and my heart rate went through the roof, and I thought I was going to pass out, so I had to lay on the floor. And all of a sudden, my body just went into this shock mode. I couldn't stop shaking, and ended up having to get the ambulance to come and get me. And they thought I was having like a heart attack. Just my heart rate had gone through the roof and they couldn't get it down. And they couldn't get me off the floor because my blood pressure had dropped. And so it was these real physical symptoms that were happening in my body. So I had every test under the sun. Nothing showed when I went to the hospital. And then I was sent to a cardiologist. So ended up being under the care of a cardiologist, and it took 4 years. I was under the care of a cardiologist, and they couldn't find anything structurally wrong with my heart. But I'd been having these episodes over a period of, I think it was every, 12 months. Then it became 6 months. So finally, this cardiologist said to me, I think that you have an autonomic nervous system dysregulation. And I'd never heard of that, so I didn't really know what he was talking about. And he referred me to another cardiologist to get a second opinion. And this second cardiologist had said that he was baffled because everything was showing in that my heart, like when I'd have the ECGs, when these episodes would happen, that they could see that there was something happening to my heart, but they couldn't figure out what it was, and they couldn't diagnose me with anything. And he was the second one that said, I think you have an autonomic nervous system issue. And he said, we can't do anything medically with that. So I was like, okay, cool. So I ended up going back to my other cardiologist, who was fantastic. And they sent me to a specialist. There's a specialist clinic that does look at the nervous system, and they can actually diagnose you. But I was diagnosed with POTS and cardiogenic vasovagal syncope, which is essentially just that your blood pressure can drop and your heart rate can increase and you can pass out. And so I'd exhausted all the medical avenues, and so I ended up going down the breathwork avenue, really. I knew someone who was a breathwork coach, so I'd been kind of watching it on the sidelines, and I'd heard them talking about the nervous system. So I ended up going to this another breathwork coach, and my first session with him, it all just made sense. Everything he was telling me and teaching me about, telling me about how the nervous system works, that was exactly what was happening to my body physically. And it was as a result of just chronic stress, chronic being in that hypervigilant state and not being able to switch off. So nervous system dysregulation is essentially when you're in that fight or flight state constantly, and it gets like stuck in the on button, in the on mode. So anyway, I got to a point with my health that it was getting worse. I had an idea of what it was, but I was still struggling to control it. So I started implementing the practices of the breathing exercises and that I had been given. Now, my health had declined pretty rapidly over about a 4-month period, early last year, actually. So I ended up, and I had moved into another role. I had to step away from the covert and specialist operations unit just because I couldn't keep going at that pace. So I ended up going to a school support officer project, just for something completely different, away from working on the worst of the worst jobs. And it just kept kind of spiraling my health. So I got to a point where I couldn't even get off the couch without my blood pressure dropping, my heart rate going through the roof. I was nauseous every day. I was dizzy every day, and I had really bad chronic fatigue. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is my future now. And I have a family member who is an ex-copper, and he was he's an absolute beautiful soul. And he was in the job back in the 90s, I think, 80s and probably 90s. He's in for 10 years. And he's now in a very, very unhealthy way. I don't want to talk too much about his situation, but I saw where he ended up, and that was as a result of PTSD, chronic stress, trauma. And I thought, this is kind of where I'm heading if I don't do something about it. So I just kind of dive straight into really trying to downregulate, get rid of all the stress in my life. So I went on leave from work. Unfortunately, I had to separate from the QPS to take up a contract secondment because they wouldn't release me from my role in the intel space. They wouldn't let me go on a secondment, so I had to actually separate from the service to take up a contract. But because my health had gone downhill, I couldn't maintain that contract and the work, so I ended up having to let it go, and so I left the job earlier this year and resigned. But I'd gone on leave for a few months before that because I was just trying to get my health under control through minimising all the stresses that I had in my life, because that was pretty much what I was told from, there's nothing medically we can do, but when you have a nervous system issue, nervous system dysregulation, it's about that chronic stress. So you have to kind of rewire your brain and your nervous system to downregulate, to be able to switch off. So even just stepping away from the job, it took months before my brain really before I stopped thinking about the job. And it took about 3 months before I even felt that difference of, okay, I didn't even realize how heightened I was. But yeah, through the breathwork practices, like that literally gave me my life back. The nervous system education gave me my life back. And I realized then that there was a massive gap in the services that are provided to first responders. There's some incredible wellbeing services. I mean, the HSOs are amazing. You've got a lot of wellbeing initiatives and wellbeing support within the service for police. But a lot of them rely on the police members to actually go and ask for help. A lot of them are reactive. They wait until someone's cracked before the services are offered. So, and I know just from the people that I know, my mates and my colleagues, a lot of them won't speak to HSOs in the job because they're worried that it's going to affect their career. And a lot of people don't want to talk about their traumas as well, or their experiences for a number of reasons, whether that's because they feel like they're told they're weak, or they think that it's weak to speak up. It's obviously becoming a lot more, people are talking about things a lot more now, so that's good. It's really important. But I feel like the nervous system education that I'm trying to teach people and providing like real evidence-based tools to downregulate and to try and switch out of that hypervigilance state after a shift, like, it's really important. And it's tools they're free tools. They're tools that we can use ourselves whenever you need them. It could be, you can use breath work in an operational sense. So if you're in a high-risk situation, critical incident, you can use the breath to kind of be able to think clearly and switch out of that fight or flight mode and just make really good tactical decisions in those high-stress environments. But the breath work is also really good for people before they start a shift or after they finish a shift when they go home. they can utilize breath work and grounding techniques. And this is all stuff that I teach in workshops and in one-on-one support to first responders, because it's something that they don't have to talk to people about. They can just use it themselves. It can help with people who are, it can help with your relationships, whether it's at work, whether it's at home. How sometimes you end up in that quite reactive state. So, you're getting in arguments more with your partner or your kids, or you're at work, you're finding that maybe there's colleagues who are a little bit more reactive than they usually are. They're indicators that someone's going down that path, or could be going down that path, and they're heading towards burnout. So I've created a bit of a nervous system dysregulation, like the evolution of nervous system dysregulation, as an early intervention tool for first responders, so that when I'm running workshops, I take them through. It's a visual tool, but it's also talks about each stage of the nervous system dysregulation. So essentially, you might start, just as a quick overview, in those first couple of years in the job as a new officer, you're pretty excited to go to jobs, and you might attend a few critical incidents, and you're in that hypervigilance state when you're there, which you need to be, that situational awareness, which is really important. You activate your fight or flight response, your fight or flight response when you're there. But when you finish that, at that scene, or when you finish your shift, you can switch off. You can still go home. You can still enjoy having dinner with your family or your friends, but you can switch off. And that's the important part, that nervous system. You're supposed to have that balance between being able to switch between the fight or flight response and the rest and digest state. But unfortunately, after years of being in the job, some people get stuck in that chronic stress state, which is your fight or flight. So after, say, about 5 years, you might start to notice that hypervigilance is really kind of staying with you. And when you go home, you can't switch off. You might find you go to a restaurant and you have to sit at the back of the restaurant because you need to see the exits and, people coming and going from the restaurant. Or you might be sitting on a train, and I know a lot of coppers, I even used to do it as a civvy. You go and sit at the back of the train so that you can see everyone coming and going off, off the train, because you had to know who's on that train with you in that carriage. So after a while, when you start to notice these things, we move into that, you start getting those feelings of anxiety maybe. And that's because you're constantly in that fight or flight state. So even if you're just sitting at home watching TV, your heart rate is still going through the roof. You're over breathing, which activates that signal to your brain that you're in danger, you're not safe, something's wrong here. And that's where we can start to develop health issues. So you might start to find you're getting a bit dizzy all the time, or a bit short of breath. So you've got that brain fog. You start to get fatigued. And these were things that started to happen to me back when I was in CPAW. And these were things probably happening to me even before I joined the job, just as a result of some of the things that I'd been through in my personal life. I just didn't realise it. So when you start to recognise these things, you can see it in yourself, but you can also see it in other people. So it's a really good early warning system. If you can identify these indicators early, and instead of dragging someone over the coals for saying something, or being reactive, or having a go at someone, or yelling at an offender or whatever on the street, maybe start asking questions. So are you okay? I've noticed that you haven't been yourself lately. Those kinds of things. So if you're stuck in that hypervigilance state, that fight or flight state, for a period of about 6 to 8 years, that can then start to lead into the functional free state, which is the extreme end of the parasympathetic nervous system, which can all get a little bit complicated. So I try and really simplify it. But essentially, it's that dissociation, that state of shutdown. It's where you start to feel really numb. The feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, feeling as though, what's the point? What's the point of even being here? What's the point of going to work? And you might see in your colleagues or your friends that they're starting to call in sick a little bit more than they usually would. They might be coming to work and all of a sudden they're very disengaged from work. They don't, might be sitting in meetings but not saying anything. You can see that the lights are on but no one's home kind of thing. And they just they don't feel anything anymore. So if you stay in that state, that can then lead into depression. And at the extreme end, it can lead into suicidal ideation and for some suicide. So, it's a very real thing, but it's not something that is spoken about. But it's very important, and I guess I want to really get my message out there that for people who are at that functional free state, who are in that shutdown state, that there is a way back, and you're not broken. Your nervous system is dysregulated, and with some help and with some tools and some strategies, you can come back from it. Because I certainly I got to that shutdown state, and it took some time. It doesn't happen overnight if you're at that, at that state, but you can definitely come back from it. So it's about being aware as well. And once you've got that self-awareness, you start to identify it in yourself. So,
yeah, Karlie, so you've gone through a lot there, obviously gone right through, trying to get into police and then right through what you actually did as a civilian in the service itself. And I just wanted to pick up something. You said vicarious trauma. I'd just like to correct you there a little bit, if you don't mind, because I know you mentioned sex crimes, videos and images and stuff like that. That's not vicarious. That's you. You would have seen and experienced that stuff. And I know we had a conversation when we had a phone conversation a couple of days ago. We were talking about how I'd never had to witness child abuse material. I dodged it. It just so happened that I didn't have to see it. And don't get me wrong, lots and lots of horrific scenes, terrible smells, terrible sights. That hypervigilance was always there, but I never had to witness child abuse material. So that to me is a very traumatizing thing. So I just want to sort of put that to bed. It's like, that's not vicarious trauma. That is the worst stuff a human can see. A good law-abiding human who cares about children, that is the worst thing you can see. So that's not vicarious trauma. Other things might be, but that wasn't. And I know you were talking about, I think the beauty of what you spoke about in that civilian role is the two very different units that you worked in. So obviously that sex crimes is that very full-on, they make people very passionate, those jobs, those especially against kids. You can't not be emotionally involved in those jobs. They just infuriate you, and the people infuriate you, and it's horrible to see. But then to move into that covert and special operations role, I've never been in a covert team as such, but I've certainly been in a plainclothes, very high-paced operational team, or a number of very high-paced operational teams, utilising physical surveillance units and lots of other methodology we don't go into much, but certainly using territory response groups. So that high end, as you said, you worked with CERT, which is the police tactical group for Queensland. So we did the same thing in the Northern Territory. And to do that all the time, I remember going home after operations, and we wouldn't do that all the time. I just did it when we had an operation. So the level of what we call it, the kinetic energy involved in those jobs was absolutely off the charts, and the hours just didn't stop. There's none of this, it's 5 o'clock, boys, knock off. It was, all right, it's 2 a.m. and mate's just gone and seen his girlfriend and now he's on the move again, so we're moving. So it was go, 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 and it just absolutely cooks you because you're operating at a very high level for a very long time. And to do that as your permanent job in a jurisdiction that's a lot bigger and has those jobs constantly, I can completely understand how that would just absolutely burn you out. Anything to add, Shelty? Any questions for Karlie there?
Mate, yeah, I like. There was a couple of important things. I've actually written down quite a lot of stuff here, Karlie. You honestly, if we were interviewing you for a crime, you'd be great because you just the amount of information you let out was fantastic. Look, the thing is, I think one thing I wrote is disassociation. So we get really good with disassociating ourselves from the crime because I mean, even when we're talking about child abuse and all that sort of thing, we kind of put ourselves in a different mind frame, which I thought was quite interesting because, people working behind the scenes mightn't have to do that. We had to be even nice to pedophiles, because we want to get them to talk to us and all that sort of thing. And it's that disassociation thing. So I thought that was, yeah. So I mean, you might have something more to add about that. Also, the thing in saying, you can't, you felt bad because you can't have PTSD from this sort of stuff. But like Damo said, of course you can. We saw one side of it because we were going to the jobs real, but reading, hearing, seeing the results, like how you got annoyed with the results of that one case, that happens to all of us, but you get to see the process that that the whole system goes through, and so the frustration is completely understandable. Um, yeah, so it's you can the more you read about that stuff, the more you see about that stuff, and of course when you're seeing it, it's different from people seeing it from the press. You're seeing the facts because that's coming from real life intel. The police officers taking the evidence and all that sort of thing. And I thought that was quite powerful. Um, the other thing I want to back up is we spoke, I think, a few episodes about, and a big shout out to the people from behind the scenes because I think they get lost because you always see the heroes as cops or as the lead investigator and all that sort of thing, but to actually get the end result a lot of the time is people like yourself that have been in the role. Yeah, so I think it's just the other thing I'll probably just so you can actually kick in a bit here, and I know we've spoken a bit off air about this sort of stuff, but one thing I want to mention to you in my last year, I mean, Damo says a number of times I was cooked. I really was. I was at my breaking point, and I'd been taught a few years before on how to meditate. And honestly, I reckon that last year in the police out at Borroloola, there's a lot of times I went home at lunchtime to meditate, and that's the only way I got through the rest of the day. Is there anything more you can add about that?
Yeah, I think so. Meditation is an amazing tool, but a lot of people struggle with meditation because they can't switch their mind off. They can't stop thinking, and other people just think meditation is crock. So
Yeah,
once you put the word
I,
meditation in
I
front of
was
anything,
one of
then
them, Carly. I
yeah,
was one of them.
I'm actually
yeah,
gobsmacked, Shelty. That's the first I'd ever heard of that.
Yeah, I don't mention it much because
Yeah.
honestly, I was so stressed out. I never really spoke about it much, but it was the only way I could get through the afternoon with all the stress
Mm.
on me. And it was somebody that was probably, not my sort of person that introduced it to me. And I tried it a couple of times and I thought, wow, holy, I can actually completely switch off. But yeah, and yeah, look, I was the last person in the world to actually consider meditation.
Second
yeah.
last,
No,
mate.
Yeah.
It's so Carly, you made a good point there. It's like you can't switch your brain off. I really struggle to do that. I completely struggle to shut it off altogether. It just doesn't happen for me. But keep
yeah.
going. Sorry, we cut you off there for a bit of humour because I can't comprehend meditating. Yeah.
No, I think so that's a bit of I've got in my slogan finding strength in stillness is because being able to sit in silence and to stop is a very difficult thing to do, especially for first responders, I think.
Yes.
And a lot, well, I don't think I know any that can actually just stop and sit still. They're always on the go. They always have to be doing something. And if they're sitting there for too long doing nothing, it's like, oh, come on, this is boring. But it's so important to be able to sit and down-regulate. And so through breathing techniques, so one really good one is what's called an extended exhale. So it's just breathing in through your nose is the most important thing. So when I do workshops and stuff, it's all about identifying and being aware of how you breathe. Because if you're breathing in through your nose, that's activating that rest and digest state. And if you're breathing in through your mouth, you can actually breathe your way into stress. So for people who are stuck in that hypervigilance state and they're stuck in that chronic state of stress and they're always on the go, you'll find that your heart rate's probably sitting high, you're over breathing, and your blood pressure's probably up. So by actually sitting and stopping and consciously taking a few minutes to just slow your breathing down, you can't tell your heart to slow down and you can't tell your blood pressure to lower, but through breathing exercises, you can physically do it. So that's where teaching people how to downregulate their nervous system through things like breath work is really important, because it only takes a few minutes. And within a few minutes, after doing a couple of minutes of, say, breathing in through your nose for 4 seconds and out through your mouth for 8 seconds and doing it slowly, that can lower your blood pressure, can lower your heart rate, it can lower the rate of breathing, so how many breaths per minute that you're breathing, and it can signal, your brain will then signal to the rest of your body that you're safe, and you can calm down, and it activates then our thinking part of our brain again. Because when you're in that fight or flight state and you're in that hypervigilance state all the time, sometimes, I don't know if you guys get it, but you can get a bit of brain fog and you can't think clearly. It kind of switches off that logical thinking part of the brain.
Just on that, I train first aid now, and I always tell people that I think first aid was always trained very poorly because it teaches someone who's thinking clearly. When you're having an adrenaline dump, like you will be, if you're performing CPR or you're dealing with someone with a catastrophic wound or really badly injured at that higher end of first aid, your IQ drops. I remember it plenty of times where I did have a big adrenaline dump, and then look back and go, why did I do that? Your IQ, you drop to your lowest common denominator when you're under that stress. It becomes that real, everything gets shed except for survival. And I think that's really important for people to understand, that you can only think big, dumb things when you're in that state. So to be there all the time, it would definitely be, and I get this. It's just, I sat there nodding the whole time you're talking because I completely understand. Like I've said before, Schultz and I are very lucky. We're not very, very mentally unwell. But when you talk about that hypervigilance, mentioned putting you back, we don't really go on trains much. There's one train in the territory called the GAN, and it costs a fortune, so we weren't on it. So that having you back in a cafe to the wall, knowing where the exits are, watching everyone is coming and going, that absolutely over the top situational awareness. Not just us, that's every first responder I can think of, but especially police, because police are looking for human behaviour. A lot of ambos are looking for a bad incident and all the rest, and fires are looking for escape exits and who knows what. I'm not going to speak for them. But police are looking for human problems. And I think that's where that really high level of that hypervigilance comes from. So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to throw it in there that everything you're saying is resonating. That's all.
Oh, that's good. Good to hear. I think if we can just give people the tools and the understanding and that awareness to understand how the nervous system works and that survival, being in that state of the survival state, how to kind of switch off and come back down from that. It's not saying that not every first responder is going to end up with chronic stress and PTSD and chronic health issues and everything, but there will be quite a large number who will. And even after the job, I did a presentation the other day just to the Retired Police Association. It was just a 30-minute overview of what I'm doing. And yeah, to have a chat to them, it was just a wonderful experience to be able to talk to them and see how they're going. They've been out of the job for 30 years, and to hear how the job affected them. And even now, one of the gentlemen was saying 30 years later, and he still gets called back for, he was in homicide. So when they open up the case, that he has to go back and give evidence. And it was one that he really struggled with. So he can't, even 30 years later, just let it go, because when he does try, it can come back up, down the track. So, and it just refuels that, all that kind of trauma from the job that he was exposed to. And then I've had other people say they've been out of the job for years, and all of a sudden there's things that are triggering memories of jobs that they worked, 20, 30 years ago, so 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So, even when you're finished the career, I think it stays with you. So, it's never too late to still learn these tools and understand what's happening to your nervous system, and to know that, you can get help. So.
Yeah. One thing actually, I just want to add in there, and you talked about brain fog. So of course when you get the adrenaline dump and all that sort of stuff, one of the things that I struggled with towards the end of my career, and Damo, I've always have spoken about this, was the time that I had a guy running at me with a tire and screwdriver, and basically everybody else panicked, running away, and I just, as calm as anything, just turned around and gone, I'm just going to have to tase this guy. I tasered him. My Apple Watch recorded my heart rate. It did not raise at all. I thought clearly the whole time. And that is probably one of the main times I thought there's something seriously wrong with me. And I remember it was after Damo and I had a beer together, and I just said to him, I said, mate, I'm fucked. I didn't have a reaction. And that is, I think, one of the things that as you go through your career, you get to. So you kind of get through that position when you get the adrenaline dumps and you can't think clearly, and then you just get exposed. You get desensitized to all the drama and all that sort of stuff, that you actually I think maybe too calm. I'm not really sure, but yeah. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, I guess it depends if you're extremely calm because you've been in that situation. I don't know that you're trained to, from your experiences, that you're okay in that situation, or depending on what else you were feeling, there may have been indicators there that you're in that functional free state, that you were
Yeah.
in that state of, you'd been operating at that heightened chronic state of stress for so long that your body had burnt out, and you just physically you couldn't react to it the way that you would have. So over time, you just get to that state where, it's that shutdown mode, and your body's just cruising because you can't feel anything.
Yeah.
And with that, Shilty, as well, I know that you've also spoken to me about times where you get inappropriate responses to, like, when I say inappropriate, I mean there should not be no response to this, but you still get some kind of reaction. I know we've spoken about sometimes you just wake up and all of a sudden there's just your heart's racing a million miles an hour, and there's a problem, but there's not a problem, and it's what's wrong with me? So it's it would all be part of it. I think it is very well. I've never really heard. Obviously, I'd heard about breath work and how it does just. I heard something about the vagus nerve. It stimulates the vagus nerve and allows it to regulate. But I'd never really heard about the nervous system dysregulation and how to re-regulate it. So that's been really interesting. And I think what we're talking about and what you're saying is really going to resonate with all your first responders, and also a huge crossover into defence personnel as well. Operating overseas for a very long time at that heightened state, and then coming back, and all of a sudden, I know there's a lot of complexities to these things. It's not all just It's not all just the fight flight system being overstimulated, and then as a result, this nervous system dysregulation kicks in. But I think it's a massive part of it because it does make you feel so out of sorts. I know that my wife, when we first left, I came back and you talked about how it took 3 months before you even realise you're not at work anymore. My wife said to me, I want you to have a month off. I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to chill. Just hang out at home, have a beer in the afternoon, just chill out. I could not do it. I'd go and look in the fridge. We didn't have milk. I was going to have a cup of tea. It's like, right, I'm going to Dorrigo. Where you go? It's an 80-kilometre round trip to get a bottle of milk. It's like, just stop. Just calm down. It's like, no, I'm going to Dorrigo. I've got to do something. Got to go. Go. I'd come straight out of the Emergency Operations Centre for COVID. It's not frontline operational policing, but I'd gone from that into there. And believe it or not, the operations cell of COVID was actually way less stressful than the job I had before that. So, and it was very, very stressful. So all of a sudden I've hit a farm where cows moo and grass grows and not much else was going on. And you talked about that 3 months. It took me about 6, and I called it inertia. It's like psychological inertia. I had so much inertia, it just took time to stop. You couldn't slam them. There are no brakes. You've just got to let it stop spinning. And that took a long time. And then I think when I realised that mine was regulated, it was about November that year, so I'd been out for about 11 months, or longer, 12 months, nearly, where I went on a Bali trip with the boys, and they were hyperactive. And then that was then that I realised that I used to be exactly like that, and now I'd wound right down. So that was another really good point there, that people are going to have that feeling when they sort of separate. But unless you had something more, I was going to say, do you want to sort of talk about what you're doing now and promote your business, give yourself a bit of a plug?
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's very new. It's a very new business because I'm trying to manage my own stress levels and my own health. I've come a long way with my health, but even good stress is still stress on the body. So that can still trigger some of my symptoms. But so I've started the Wolf Wellbeing, and primarily I'm working with first responders. So I've run a couple of workshops now to a couple of policing teams, and they're 4-hour workshops, and they go through nervous system dysregulation, breathing techniques. We touch on the indicators, the early warning signs, talk a little bit about PTSD, trauma, all that kind of stuff. I also work one-on-one with people doing breathwork and nervous system education. Although I am primarily working with police, I also have a company that's just started using me to a corporate company who have been using me to work with their staff. So people who are working in high stress roles, even as managers, they're still struggling with these chronic health issues that are starting to kind of rear their heads after they've been in these stressful jobs for long periods of time. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. But my goal is to really get into that first responder space. Hopefully I can get in and do education and training packages so that people either in whether it's policing or the firies or paramedics, I can help train people in this area so that or recruits before they even come in, so they have that nervous system regulation before they even join the job, so they're aware of it. That's where I'd love to be, working in that first responder space. So it's kind of what I'm doing at the moment, and we'll just see how I go. It's pretty hard getting in, getting into the government with finances and stuff. So trying to get some funding and just working out how I can get in and hopefully help somebody, because that's what I'm just trying to help prevent people from ending up where I did, and or if they're already there, to give them some strategies and hope that they can come back from it. That you're not broken. I've heard so many times from so many people that I've been in the job 25 years plus. Oh, I'm broken. I'm like, you're not broken.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mate, that's a very important, I suppose, thing to say because I know Damo and we've dealt with a number of people that committed suicide. Especially people have been in it long term and all that sort of thing. And there's always a breaking point for someone. It doesn't matter. And the thing is, whether it's sooner or whether it's later, it usually depends on either a accumulation of events or it could be one significant one, like you spoke about. And I know that when I was working in DV, it was a highly stressful situation. They would have us talking to psychs. I think it was every 3 months or 6 months. I can't really remember.
Yeah, it was the well checks. It was the quarterly well checks.
Yeah, and I remember one of the questions on the questionnaire was, do you ever wake up and feel like it's not going to work, or like it's not worth going to work? And during that whole time, never, ever in my time did I sit there and go, I would start the day and I said, you know what, we're going to kick ass today. And I would go at it 100%. And at the end of the day, you don't kick ass, but I mean, you get jobs done and all that sort of thing. And you go back and do it again. And this is years and years and years of doing this. And there was one day in Ramangini, I woke up one morning and I said, well, I'd start work at 8, but I was always starting work at either 6:30 or 7. And I woke up and I thought, you know what? Doesn't matter if I don't rock up. And if I rock up at 8, that's fine. And I knew then, just from that questionnaire from the psychs, that, yeah, my time had come, because I just knew it just I didn't have that same enthusiasm, because you've just been knocked back or smashed so many times. You're trying to make a difference and you're not making that difference. And it takes a long time to get over that. And I think, I think all of us have felt that. Wouldn't you say, Damo?
Yeah, definitely. And what I think, one thing about Karlie's, the way that your business is structured, sorry, just in relation to that as well, is that it was impossible, and it is probably still it's still fairly impossible in the minds of people who are motivated to be really good police, to get into a really high impact, very active operational area that are in that role, like that DV role or other roles such as the tactical response and all those really full-on, time-critical, extremely high-pressure jobs. Those people will ultimately end up normally suffering the most. However, they are very practical people, generally speaking, and they don't want to be victims. So to give them a set of tools that they can fix themselves, and like you said, they don't have to talk to anyone, they can just do it themselves. And I mean, it's not going to fix everything, but there's certainly going to go a hell of a lot better than doing nothing. I think that's really good. I think it's great, because the biggest problem for us was the stigma of being a victim. Is, I'm not a victim of bloody anything. I've just got a sore leg. I need to stretch it out. That's all it is. Just take away sore leg and add minor mental health injury. And that's how you do it. You've got to fix that. So, and I think being able to regulate the nervous system and remove that fight or flight goes a long way to being able to then regulate your thought processes and actually fix what's going on. So I think it's just an outstanding thing you're doing. It is a bit niche. It's the first time I've heard of someone who's actually going around coaching it. So that's really good. Well, we're supporters. We're all for it. Anything that can help people who are doing this job. And we're not big. We're a bit old school. We're still kind of, you kind of still need to harden up. Like, it's a tough job. You can't do this job if you're a goddamn wimp. And there's time for wimps. Wimps have got their place, but it's not in the police force, and it's certainly not in those really high impact roles. I think what we're talking about is those guys who are the really high performing, and all of a sudden the wheels fall off. And like you say, you're not broken. You just need to re-regulate what's going on. So I think that's my takeaway. It's just really good to hear.
And look, mate, just before anybody goes on, I'm going to back that up. I've got a lot of mates that I knew were, hard, tough, and all that. And a lot of them have just gone, the wheels have fallen off.
Yeah.
And I think, just to back up what Damo said, have something like that. Like I said, that meditation for me was a godsend, really. It got me through the afternoon. And if you can teach that to people, especially early on, if I had that earlier on in my career, I suppose maybe I would have gone longer. I don't really know. But I think it's important that people can switch off. And Damon and I have spoken about constantly about the police club. That's what it was. It was a time to switch off. It was a time to, just chat to your colleagues about stuff that was going on. Dame and I spoke 100 times. We think we're reasonably mentally sane because a lot of us spoke together about, personal stuff and all that sort of stuff. And, it's in a safe space. It's important to have those spaces so you kind of get, I suppose, people that understand what you're talking about and people that are actually going through the same thing. But also to back that up with what you're doing and your breathing exercise. Breathing is one of the biggest things in when you're actually doing. Oh, geez, I've lost my mind now. When you're actually meditating, breathing is one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
If you control your breathing and just think about your breathing, so you're just thinking about your breathing in, your breathing out, it actually allows you to switch off. Can I mean, obviously you know a lot more about that than what I do. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, so it kind of puts you into that alpha state. So when you're breathing, a lot of people who can't just switch their brain off, it's because they're still operating in that, that the heart rate's still up and they're still kind of activated. Or so when you slow down your breathing and you're consciously breathing less, that'll kind of then naturally put you into that really relaxed state. And then that allows you to actually then go in and do a really good meditation because you need to get into that lower alpha state before you to meditate. But it just quietens the mind and it kind of just allows you to completely come
Yeah.
down and relax.
I think it what it did to me was take my mind off. If I concentrate on the breathing, it takes my mind off everything else.
Yeah.
When I was in the DV unit, I remember saying that I couldn't switch off until I had 2 beers. Once I had 2 beers, my mind was calm. But if you can do it another way, because not everybody's a drinker,
Yeah.
I mean, not that we're promoting drinking, but it was just for us, a lot of the time it was a way to switch off. But if you
It
can
was
do
more the social aspect too. It wasn't so much the
it,
alcohol; it was the social aspect of it, and just that take the edge off and then have a chat. It's probably, of course, there'd be other ways to do it, but for us, there was something about that. It was just the other thing is the territory's a bloody hot place, and it was nice and cool. Yeah.
I talk about with the nervous system dysregulation and how easy it is, not easy, but you can how people end up with addictions through the nervous system dysregulation because they're looking for something to try and calm themselves, whether it's through alcohol or eating or drugs or whatever it is. There's a reason for that, and it's usually that nervous system dysregulation. If you're that hyper arousal, in that hyper arousal state, by having a few drinks, it brings you down a little bit, so you're feeling that calm feeling. But then people who are depressed might want to take something to uppers in that to try and to feel like they're alive again and feel something again. So this whole nervous system dysregulation thing it's very complex and there's a lot to it. I'm just trying to give it kind of a broad introduction, I guess, to how it works, so people can go and have a look at, start researching things themselves if they want to. But I know coppers like evidence, as do I. So when I do my workshops, one of the first things I do, because I copped a little bit of shit from a few people when they first came in, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to be holding hands and singing Kumbaya." So I said, "No, you guys can do that if you want to, but to kind of get people to realise that this is all scientifically backed and it really does work. I take metrics before I do breathing exercises, so they do look at their heart rate, I take their blood pressure, all that kind of stuff, look at their breathing rate, then introduce the breathing exercises, and it's only a couple of minutes, 4 minutes, and within 4 minutes of doing 2 different breathing exercises, we then take all those metrics again, and we have a look at the results, and the results are, that's what gets people to listen, because they go, "Oh, holy shit, my blood pressure just dropped, and I'm on medication for that. I'm on medication for high blood pressure," because when you stay in these states, a lot of the time you end up with cardiovascular issues or hypertension or diabetes and all that kind of stuff. So by showing people that, they can actually see their blood pressure coming down and their heart rate and their breathing coming down. It kind of, I guess, for people who don't really believe in it, or they're a bit, it's a bit woo-woo, I go, well, no, it's not. We're working with evidence here, so it shows people, and then they go, oh, okay, all right, now we'll listen a little bit more. So, but it is a very powerful thing. Like I said, it pretty much gave me my life back. That's why I'm trying to get the message out there. It's really important.
Yeah. No, perfect, Karlie. We thank you heaps for coming on. It's been really good, actually. It's really good to hear someone else saying the stuff that we were just not scientifically minded enough to be able to eloquently state. Hey, Shilty.
Oh, yeah, mate. That is definitely not part of me.
No, but that's really good. So, Wolf Wellbeing is the name of your company, only newly launched. But how do people get in touch with you if they're interested? I know you're obviously targeting that first responder, emergency services style of audience. Did you want to have other people being able to contact you as well? And would you like to let us know how you do that?
Yeah, just Instagram or wolfwellbeing@gmail.com. You can email me, but Instagram's probably an easy one if you've got Instagram. Haven't got too much on there because I'm quite new and I'm not really great with the social media side of things. Yeah, it's not my forte, but if people reach out and message and want to have a chat, more than happy to have a talk to people.
That's fantastic.
Anyone that I can help, happy to try and help them in that space.
Yeah.
So,
and look, we'll put that up on our socials as well. Hopefully, give you a bit of a kick along, because I think it's very important. You're very genuine, and what you're doing it for is the right reason. So, like you said, like Damo said, you've got our support.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you both having me on.
On a really serious note too, just before we move on, is quite full on. During your entire operational time, did you ever see anyone stuff up and up where you think they had a carton of the week?
That you can mention, Karlie. That you can mention.
Obviously, the covert and that side of things, probably not. But
I do have a doozy, but don't know if I can.
Everyone says that. Everyone says to me, "Oh, I got some crackers, but I can't tell you." It's like, why not? You can generalize it.
You know how we get away with it, Karlie? We just sit there and go, I heard this story once.
Here's a story.
All right, I might be able to share a little. I might be able to give a little bit.
Yep.
Look, let's just say maybe ringing the offender and leaving a voicemail saying who you are and where you're from.
Oh, dearie me.
Yeah, that's definitely a cartonable offence.
And that's easy to do. A lot of people who aren't involved in this will not understand how that's easy to do. I'm not going to go into methodology, but you get so many phone numbers that you're looking at and things like that. You're going no further than that. However, you're also ringing people who you don't necessarily know. They're not in your phone. You're ringing from phone numbers. And I've actually seen that happen as well, where there was a number that we were interested in, and that's all I'm saying about that. That was written down, and then there was another number underneath that as to our victim that we had to contact. And we went to ring that person, and they rang the wrong number, and the target answered.
Yep.
And to that copper's credit, they very quickly went, "Who's this man? What? Oh, no, sorry, brass, wrong number," and clunk. And that was it. And they did it really well. But the trouble is when you've got a hyper-paranoid person getting phone calls from people who they don't know, and then, Well, that's good. That's actually, I reckon that's not a bad carton.
That's definitely a cartonable offence.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of people that can relate to that one as well.
Yeah. in that sort of, that level of investigative role, they could definitely relate to something like that. A simple human slip up in a very, very high pressure environment.
Yes. So, sure, it happens a little bit.
That's a pretty good carton of the week. What are your thoughts, Chelsea?
Well, mate, look, the other thing is this is going to lead on. We've got a couple of we've got a lot that have come into cartonable offences. One is I mean, even in the fiery world, which we know, fireys, we all think they're perfect, and everybody thinks they're perfect because everybody loves the fireys. I've said the joke plenty of time, why they're police, so fireys can have heroes, and that's just a bit of a dig at all the fireys out there,
Yeah.
but we love you, really. But, you do make mistakes every now and again. And, mate, there's a couple in here. There's a couple I can't really mention because, they're just quite big accidents where quite a bit of damage was done to the vehicle in question in the forest, which anybody can understand because when you're in those pressure situations. And before I mention this one, I'm just going to mention one in Catherine. I remember we had this car fire many, many years ago, and the local fire came out. They parked up their car, and problem it was a little bit downhill. And this car, of course, usually it ends up reaching the fuel tank. So the car kind of really burst, and we were standing. It was a cold night, so honestly, we're trying to get a bit of warmth from the car, from the fire. So we're still probably 100, 150 meters away. Anyway, this fuel tank just went up, and
Yep.
one of the conrods or something just went shooting down the road between all of us standing there. We're like 150 meters away, and this thing just shot between us, and we're just going, holy shit, we're actually still too close. During that time also, the fire had parked, where he was parked was over the gutter where the fuel started leaking out, and the fire was trailing the fuel, which ended up underneath the fire's
Yeah.
vehicle.
Try and explain that.
Yeah, you better move that one pretty quickly. But and that's a pardonable offence. Wouldn't you agree,
So,
Damo?
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's bad enough that the fuel ran underneath the vehicle, but geez, had that car burnt, that's a carton. That's a
Yeah.
carton. And quite a bit of an explanation too, but I think that's good enough anyway. So that's two. So
Yep.
calling
Mate,
the offender on a highly covert matter. I mean, it's almost a shame we can't completely explain that, but the methodology, I don't release methodology, so we're not talking about that. But
yeah.
I'd be murdered.
one aspect, and then fire is you got one job, and it's basically to put fire out and try not to burn your own vehicle. So that's always
That's right.
that's not bad. That's two. What are your thoughts, Karlie? What you happy with those two? Obviously,
I think
we've
the
got
fireys is
thousands.
great.
I missed that. Say again.
I just said I think the fireys is great.
Yep, love it. The trickle fly down underneath the vehicle. Yeah, God, love it. Yeah, so carton of the week. We can just dish them both out.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a covert police officer trying to play sneaky buggers and catch crooks, and you actually call your target, that's not real good. And if you're firing a job and you set fire to your own vehicle, that's not real good either. So
No.
yeah,
Mate,
anyway.
now, are we going to save his carton up? I've still got about another 3 or 4 more.
I think we save them up. We don't need more than that. I think one or two is because we're flowing thick and fast. I must admit, I've got a couple
Which
as well.
one? We're going to hand it over to Carla here. Which one do you think is worse,
I
or
think the
more of a
fireys.
pardonable offence?
I think the fireys has got to be the
The-
better one.
I don't know.
Pretty big. Well, wish I could tell you the rest of the other one, but
No, that's the trouble with covert stuff. You can't say anything about it. But no, but I get that because I've been involved in a few of them and I understand exactly what went on. So, yeah.
The other thing, look, Carly, one of the other things, you must have some pretty good stories about. Is there any? I know it's difficult, but is there anything you can talk about that really, I suppose, we Damo and I always we talk about the negative stuff a fair bit. But we always talk about the positive stuff where we laugh, and they're more the pardonable offences. But is there jobs that gave you a really good feeling at the end of the day? Now
unfortunately, I just go straight to all the horrible jobs. Not really. It was they were all. There was a lot of. I guess you felt like there's a lot of reward in what we did.
Yeah.
So even though the nature of the work that you're working with is, pretty horrific, there was a lot of, I guess, celebrations over some of the jobs that you once they'd finished, you saw, the outcomes, and you go, oh, well, part of that. That was awesome. So it was a rewarding job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't think of a specific job that had that was a positive one. I guess because we didn't not like we're out on the road where you can help an old lady across the road or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, so no, absolutely loved my job, and yeah, I'm sad that I'm not in there anymore in the capacity that I was in there. But yeah, awesome career.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to add one more thing. The one thing I want to talk about. So one thing Damon and I are big about is camaraderie. Obviously, you felt like you were part of a team, and that's a really really great feeling. Um, where you can come at the end of the day and sit there and go, whatever happens, you're just working with a really good team, and I think that's. Well, for us, it was really, really important. I imagine that was really important for you as well.
Oh, so important when you've got when in the intel space, you kind of you've got a command that owns you, so you're an intel command, and the intel teams that I worked with, and the people that I worked with, they were so we had sworn and civilian intel staff. So whether you're a police officer or a civvy, it didn't matter. You were still an intel team, and the teams I worked with were incredible, beautiful people, like incredible people, all very passionate about their job, put in 110%. And the units that we were then hosted by, so we'd go and work for support units. The officers in those units just made us feel like, well, for me personally, I know some people doesn't happen to everyone, but I was always made to feel just like I was one of them. And the support there was brilliant. I had some fantastic managers. Yeah, so but being able to talk to the guys and have that support when you needed it was really important. So yeah,
And it's
no,
such an important role. Just before we wrap up, too, just a lot of people outside the police, everyone sort of gets a cop, they see a police officer. Most people, when you say police, they picture a highway patrol vehicle pulling over to give you a ticket for doing 63 in a 60 zone. That's not really so much more than that, obviously. The intelligence side of things is really that research into your target, and I'm not going to go into it, but basically it gives you lots and lots of information to work on. As an operational detective sergeant running a team, I relied on so much intelligence to get back. My guys were really good. They knew a lot anyway. But then when we got intelligence support, I go, all right, and I sort of had used intelligence before, so I was like, right, can we get profiles run up on these guys? And then the product we got back was beyond my wildest expectations. And to be able to present that out to everyone, go, right, here's all this information. I remember my guys looking at it and going, holy shit, this is like CSI with that chick with too much makeup. We got all this information. Like we would never have dreamed of this. We might have found them on Facebook or something, but this is unbelievable. So
yeah,
the only problem with being public talking about intel and covert operations is you can't say anything. There's so much operational methodology that's protected there that I will never say it. I'll go to my grave. I will never, and I'm not a copper. I can say what I like, but I'm on no obligation to hold back information. But I'm not going to ever release that methodology. But it's incredible what you can get from people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It was really, really good.
And it's all people, and there's, like I said, we gave a shout out to those people behind the scenes. And Karlie, thank you so much for coming on, because I think it's important for those people behind the scenes doing all that sort of work. That's so important. I mean, that, like I said, sometimes you might see the sergeant and they're the hero on the screen, but it's everybody behind the scenes that actually gets that result. And I know a lot of those heroes would say exactly the same thing. When they will give thanks for their staff, because they couldn't have done it without people like yourself doing that high level. And like you said, it's just as stressful as being a police officer, because you're constantly on guard and constantly trying to find stuff out, and because you actually morally you want a good result, so it drives you to do that. So for everybody out there that that does work behind the scenes, thank you very much. It's it's a massive help, and we couldn't have been as good as we were or as seen to be. It's a team effort. Somebody always gets usually the bosses. They all get the high fives and all that sort of thing. But it's everybody that does the work behind the scenes that actually gets the result. So yeah.
Well summed up. Anything to say? Anything else, Karlie? You happy with that?
No, I was just going to say if there's any civilians listening that are struggling as well. I think they probably don't, maybe a bit like me, don't realise just how much of a toll the job can take on you. So just be aware of it, have some self-awareness, and if you need help, just reach out to your support networks and your friends and your family. And I think like even, your comms operators and admin staff, the station clerks, a lot of the stations, the front counter admin people, like they do an incredible job. So there's so many civvies out there as well who I guess probably don't realise just how much the job can get to them as well. So
definitely,
that's probably the only message I just wanted to leave with.
Yeah, and look, just for anybody listening, a lot of the time we used to get our interviews transcribed by admin staff, so they hear everything, that we've spoken to about to offenders and victims and all that sort of thing, and hearing it, and I've spoken about it. Like sometimes we visualize a lot of stuff. We're in the middle of the action, but hearing all those senses can trigger, depression, all that sort of thing. So and get in contact with us, or through you, Karlie. We'll put your stuff up on our socials and all that. So if you want to reach out, please reach out, because I think what you're doing is admirable.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for having me on here. I really appreciated it. It's been lovely having a chat.
Oh, good. It wasn't too nerve-wracking, was it?
Sorry?
It wasn't too nerve-wracking, was it?
Oh, a little bit. Glad it's over. I just hope I made some sense.
We're so intimidating. But that'll do us. We're done.
We're done for another legends.
Week. And we're done for another week, Shelty. What do you reckon?
Mate. Before I finish, though, I'm just going to have to mention this, and I am sorry, and I did mention it to Karlie the other day that, and my partner said it's great to have a female on, especially one that's gone through so much stuff and behind the scenes and all that, because she did mention it's too much of a sausage fest at the moment on the touring corp. So
it's a chipolata fest, but anyway. Very good. On that delightful note, we'll probably cut it away, Shelty. Outstanding. So that's 200 cops for another week. Thanks very much, Karlie. That's been brilliant. And we'll be back next week again.
Yep, we will. Guys. And stay on, Karlie. We'll have a chat to you afterwards. And to everybody else, we'll see you next time.